What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is the Blacklist Season 10, Episode 10, The Postman. So you'll notice, obviously, my whole setup is different. It's because I'm in a different area, different location, and I do have my tablet, but I am unable to control the sounds around me as well. So I figured using a mic might be a bit better, just because it'll allow me to keep it more focused on my voice. Also, the fact that it'll make it easier for me to edit if anything goes wrong, if I need to pause. However, I don't really have a webcam, so I'm using my laptop camera, which fortunately doesn't look great, but I'll work with it the best I can. But anyways, as far as this episode is concerned, I think it feels kind of like just a pause, after such an intense, I want to call it a mid-season finale, but I already know it's not a mid-season finale. But it feels like it's sort of taking a break for a second. Let's focus on just taking down some random blacklister, which I don't really know how I feel about that, because on the one hand, it does sort of feel like there should be some changes. We do see how the team feels about what Reddington did in the last episode, and yet we're just not really talking about that right now. We're not really focused up on that right now. Let's just work with him for this, and we'll take down this bad guy. And I don't know. It's one of those things where it feels like the writers want to keep everything on the status quo. They want to keep it where everybody is still, well, we're working together just like always. It's still the blacklist. But this is a situation where the way you ended last episode made it feel like we can't just go back to normal. And then we went right back to normal. It's the same story. It's the same old. We don't trust Reddington. We don't like what he's doing. And yet we'll still work with them to catch the bad guys. That's kind of been the story since season 1. I would have liked to see maybe a little bit of change this time. Maybe the team does start doing something differently. Maybe, I don't know, just something different. Something that's not, let's just go back to the status quo. So I'm a little frustrated with that. As far as the case is concerned and the postman, that was okay. I feel like there might have been a little bit more they could have done with Cooper and his story involved with this guy. Because I feel like when you got to the end of it, we still didn't even really know whether or not he committed the crime. If he did, I mean, okay, so that basically makes Cooper feel good about himself, but in the end, it kind of feels like, no, he didn't do it. We're just not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about, well, then who did do it? Why was he being framed by somebody? Was it just a really unlucky coincidence? It feels like there should have been a bit more to that, but it kind of feels like we just sort of glossed over it to focus more so on the present day. And I don't know, because they left some of that a mystery, I'm sitting here asking questions about it. And I don't like that feeling of not being able to get conclusion, not being able to get closure on a case like that. So I really wish we'd maybe gotten a few more answers, but I understand why they didn't, because in the end, it's not really the answer to that case that mattered. It's more so what it meant for Cooper and his ideologies going forward. And then the final thing to talk about is Wrestler hanging out with this other guy, helping him, sponsoring him almost. It feels like it's okay. I I'm not sure if it's going to go anywhere. It feels like it is. It feels like this is too important. We're spending too much time on this story for it to just go away, quickly. So I'm almost kind of wondering, because we know this guy works in the government, I'm almost kind of wondering if this is going to somehow tie into Reddington. Like maybe he's setting up some sort of team to go after him. Maybe it's the government, the part of the government that knows about the task force, knows about Reddington's deal, and they've decided, you know what, we're done. We're done catering to him. We're done giving him this stuff. So we're just going to find a way to take him down. And especially now that Reddington went in and erased his connection to the FBI, it almost kind of feels like, well, that means your immunity agreement's gone too, right? So what's stopping them from arresting you? I don't know. I just have a few theories, I guess, about what this could possibly be, but I don't really know for sure. It just feels like this guy has been kind of planted in there. He's put into the story, and there's not really any point for him outside of, oh, wrestlers sponsoring him, wrestlers helping him through his addiction. It feels like there's going to be a bit more than that. I know this show and the writers, or at least the writing style, well enough to know that anything that seems insignificant, anything that seems, oh, it's just there, just on the side. No, more than likely, there's going to be something else. There's going to be something to that story that is going to come into play later. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with that, but that's about it for this first episode. Obviously, I'm going to keep, I think, the style of these reviews very much the same, where I still like to just sort of stream of consciousness, sort of ramble about my thoughts. But one thing that editing these together will help is I'll be able to cut a little bit whenever, I don't know what to say and I'm stuck trying to think of a name or a word or something like that. So, but yeah, we'll move on to the next episode. I'll see you there in a minute. Now, episode 11, The Man in the Hat. So this one feels a little bit more like a, I think, a good follow-up to episode 9 and everything that happened there. So I don't know why exactly we had that 10th episode in the mix, because it feels like that was a lot more of just a, we're not going to talk about what happened. And then now this one, we're like, okay, let's talk about what happened and let's actually resolve the conflict there. So a little weird that that 10th episode happened in the first place, but whatever the case, this one does feel like it resolves some of the conflict that was born. I still do wish that we maybe got something a little different, something a little bit more intriguing of the idea, like Reddington possibly being a villain now that they have to go after, or just changing up his relationship with the task force to begin with. But after this, I mean, it kind of feels like we're just going back to the same old, where they still don't really trust him. Still feels like there's that, not entirely sure what to think of him, but at the end of the day, he definitely seems like he's still a deep down good guy. So I think it was a fine episode in that regard. I think everything to do with what happened inside of the convenience store, I think it was very well set up. Maybe a little predictable, whenever they go in, see the guy in the fedora and all of his attire. Pretty much everybody could probably guess that, yeah, Reddington probably killed the guy for them, saved their lives, and then promised them riches if they lied. And even whenever they were saying, yeah, he left out the back door or went to the station, even that kind of felt pretty obvious that no, they're lying to cover for him. He probably hid somewhere in the store and is just waiting for everybody to leave. So it was predictable. The one thing that wasn't predictable for me was how Reddington handled the situation with Panna Baker, deciding to essentially give her what he was using to blackmail her all this time, to kind of convince her, hey, look, I don't want you working for me because you feel forced to. I want you to work for me because you see the good that the task force is doing. So in that sense, it was a little surprising that she was just sort of instantly, yeah, okay, cancel the meeting. It does feel a little too simple from her point of view. Maybe that fear of what he was capable of, maybe that's what was driving her to, I guess, force the issue, force Harold into this decision. So maybe being released from that kind of spurred her on to say, you know what, maybe I'm just jumping a little too quickly into this decision, and let me actually think about what I'm doing first. So, but I think it's good that we're not doing this yet. I do wish maybe this was what they decided to do. Maybe Panna Baker did eventually just get to a point of, I can't keep making excuses. I can't keep, he went and killed this guy that we were trying to prosecute. I can't keep making excuses for that. If they had done this maybe a little bit closer to the end of this season, I would have believed that there's a chance that, yeah, the task force is going to be disbanded. They are going to go after Reddington. But because we're not even, like, we're now officially halfway through this season, I didn't feel like that was going to happen at this point. There would be a whole half of a season where it would just be, hey, we need to track down Reddington. And it would have been kind of interesting, but it didn't feel like something they would do. It feels like if we're going to be doing something along those lines, if that's where the story was going to take us next, I feel like that's going to be more so we're setting it up for like the final 5 episodes or something like that. But whatever the case, I still think this was a good episode. I liked kind of the realization at the end whenever he wrote the letter to Agnes and explained why he was in Philadelphia, because it did feel very random for him to just be out there buying some peanut chews. So to hear why he went out there, it did. It was a nice resolution, I think, for this story, and kind of showed that yeah, he does some bad things, but in the end, he is still the person that we, the audience, should be rooting for. So I think, uh, especially this season, a little bit last season too, I think that feeling of who do we root for, the task force or Reddington, I think that started to get a little bit more difficult to say. So I think this one kind of brought it back to his side a little bit. So good episode. On to the final of these three. I'll see you there in just a minute. And finally, episode 12, Dr. Michael Albani. Now, granted, this is one that feels a lot more like it's giving us a bit more, I guess, backstory on Dembe, which we knew most of this stuff. I think it's just getting to see how he met Isa and all of that. So that stuff was fine. I thought it was well put together, well told. As far as the case, though, it really wasn't all that interesting. I mean, the guy who did it was super obvious. We've already had this, I think, multiple times in the past few seasons where the guy who is super praising the person who has either been killed or the person who's being framed for the crime. Like anytime you have a person that comes in, it's like, oh yeah, no, there's no way they could have done it. I mean, such a nice person. I can't believe he would do something. It's them. It's almost always them. And I don't know. Why couldn't we get something maybe a little bit more twisty and turny? Something that isn't so obvious, something that isn't as soon as the guy starts talking, as soon as words come out of his mouth, it's he did it. I we just had too many of those, I think, for me personally. Because I mean, I'm not I don't remember this in the Blacklist. I don't remember having moments of, well, this is super obvious for past cases. It feels like it's been very few and far between where if there's a mystery, if it's a who done it, tends to be kind of I don't know, plot twisty. Is that the right term? It feels like there's a lack of cleverness in the more recent episodes that I've watched, where it feels like whenever they do write a who done it, you don't really have to think too hard about it. It's most of the time whoever is acting the most again or the least like a killer tends to be the one that did it. And for me, that's just not that interesting. I feel like you could have done a lot more with it. The episode is titled Michael Albani, and it has a number next to his name, like he's on the blacklist, and yet he's a totally innocent guy that we don't even see him after he gets arrested in the first scene. So why is he on the blacklist? Why don't we see him ever again? We don't get to see him and Isa reconnecting. Are we going to see him again in the future? Is this story going to come back around, and that's why we didn't see a resolution for it? I don't feel like that's the case. Based on how this episode came to an end, based on its conclusion, I don't feel like there's any more to come out of this. So I I don't know. This case itself, it definitely felt very weak in the writing. It felt very pointless by the end of it. It felt like we're furthering some of the story. We're introducing this Anthony Hudson guy. I think that's his name. I'll get it eventually. But we're introducing him. He's looking into the task force. He's trying to get more information to figure out what they're doing and all of that. And so we're building that up at the moment. But you got to give something interesting when it comes to the individual cases that you're presenting every episode. You know, this connection that Dembe has to his ex-wife, or I guess ex-lover, his daughter's mom. You've got that connection to this case. You've got that history there. We're learning more about what happened there. That should be more interesting. And instead, it's just very straightforward. Why did she leave him? Well, because he lied to her. Why did he lie to her? Well, it was for Reddington. I mean, I could have guessed all of that in the first 5 minutes. So it just feels like there was not a whole lot of thought put into this. It was very bare bones, very basic, very plain and obvious. for anybody who's watched an episode of the Blacklist before. And again, I feel like we've just seen a lot of those in these past few seasons that I've watched. And I'm a little disappointed by that. We're getting to the end of the show. I want to be surprised. I want to feel like the writers are staying one step ahead. And in some cases they have, but in others, in the more, I guess, one-off episodes, I feel like they've lost their touch. They've not really presented me with a whole lot of interesting stories and interesting narratives. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm not sure what changed. Maybe they just, you get to season 10, maybe you run out of ideas for cases. Maybe you run out of interesting plot twists. And so, I honestly, I feel like the same thing happened with Bones. By the time I got to the end of that show, every case was just so predictable. I feel like at some point the writers, maybe they just run out of ideas and creativity, and it's just, let's just make it the most obvious stuff ever. But maybe that's just me. Maybe there are other people who really enjoyed it. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these 3 episodes? Did you feel like they were as obvious as I did? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Blacklist reviews. Also check out the channel for the other Let's Plays we have on there. And until next time, I hope you guys have a great day. I will talk to you all later. Peace out.